Welcome to Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons, where each week we discuss the history and events that help shape the life from the hollers of Appalachia to the hills of the Ozarks. Now, here's your host, Shane Simmons.
And thank you so much for joining us for episode 2 of Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons, and I am Shane Simmons, your host. Today's episode is going to be jam-crammed, slam-packed full of stuff. We're going to settle a feud. We're going to take 10 paces, and they're going to draw on each other. Going to find out which show is better, the Andy Griffith Show versus the Beverly Hillbillies, a couple of heavyweights in Hillbilly land. We're going to settle that all once and for all here today. We'll also clear up the difference between some terms that you might be familiar with, and that's the word hillbilly, redneck, and white trash. Trying to separate that because a lot of people tend to lump all those things together as the same thing, and that's just not necessarily the case, as you'll soon find out. We'll also do a few more of our mountain phrases that we started last week since that was so popular. We'll keep that thing rolling, and then, if time permitting, we'll talk about one of the hillbilly towns we've got. I give a little history of that and background about how it's got its name. So let's get started because like Smokey and the Bandit, we got a long way to go and not much time to get there. Well, it's time. We're going to settle this thing once and for all. A lot of people have watched Andy Griffith Show. A lot of people with the Beverly Hillbillies. They were both based at about the same time. And they actually squared off for viewers back in the day. So we'll decide once and for all if for the year 2019, which one of these holds up better and which is the better representation and more beloved in Hillbilly land. So there's two of the most popular shows about the Life Mountain, but as always, only one can be our champion here today. And let's get it started by talking a little bit about both of the shows. We'll start with the Andy Griffith Show. It debuted in 1960 and ran until 1968 and ended up having 249 episodes. And of those, 159 were black and white. And that's important because, as anybody that's watched the show knows, there was a big drop-off in quality of the shows after the black and whites ended. Now, I don't know if it was the fact that it went color or the fact that that happened to coincide with the exit of one Bernard P. Fife, but there's no doubt that the show definitely dropped off in popularity after that, and especially when you go to rewatch them today, it's just the color episodes just did not hold up as well. The Andy Griffith Show starred Andy Griffith as Sheriff Andy Taylor as in the fictional town of Mayberry, North Carolina. And it featured Deputy Barney Fife, Andy's Aunt Bee, Andy's son Opie, his girlfriend Helen Crump, Barney's girlfriend Thelma Lou, Floyd the Barber, Gomer Powell, and then later Goober Powell, who were both mechanics at Wally's filling station. And then we had Otis the Town Drunk, of course, and who can ever forget Ernest T. Bass. So it had a huge cast of characters, and they had so many different popular sayings that came from that a lot of people just instantly know exactly what you're talking about. It's very hard to fool. Anybody that's watched Andy Griffith Show knows when you say, "Citizens arrest! Citizens arrest!" The world-famous one where Gomer arrests Barney Fife for an illegal U-turn on Main Street. And that's one of the more iconic episodes. And then, of course, Ernest T. Bass with his famous, it's me, it's Ernest T. And then finally, of course, Barney Fife's inimitable, nip it in the bud. You know, he was, that didn't sound nothing like any of them. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about as soon as you hear the phrases because they're just iconic associated with those characters, and they live on even to today. And the show still has such a cult following today. It's as popular as ever. Really has never dipped. And certain episodes, such as the pickle story, if anybody remembers that one, with Aunt Bee making what was termed as kerosene cucumbers with the awful pickles that Barney and Andy had to choke down. And then, of course, there was the citizen's arrest that I just referred to, and then Barney's notoriously bad singing at Barney in the choir, where they tried to lose him from the choir with John Masters, choir singer. I'm actually pretty knowledgeable of Andy Griffith trivia myself. And the show, again, holds up extremely well after all these years, and a lot of its, even things such as its theme song, all you have to do is whistle a few notes of that, and almost anybody knows what you're talking about. It's a lot of people don't realize that that's actually a song called The Fishing Hole and had some lyrics with it. If you're interested, I encourage you. It's on YouTube. You can look it up. And Andy Griffith actually sings the lyrics at least in the version that I've heard, something about, so just take down your fishing pole and meet me at the fishing hole. So that's kind of how that goes. There's obviously a lot more to it than that, but it's a lot of people are surprised to know it has lyrics like that. A friend of mine was talking about he dated a girl once who had I guess it was a parakeet or a parrot, one that whistled that theme song and talked about how cute it was the first time you heard it, but after about 40 or 50 times of going over there, it got pretty annoying, and last I heard, that bird was banished into the basement with a sheet over top of it so it would quit its yapping, but that's that song will just stick in your head. And like I said, even today, almost anybody who's ever watched an episode knows instantly what you're talking about when you start whistling that tune. Let's move on to the Beverly Hillbillies. Talk a little bit about them. That show debuted in 1962 and aired until 1971, so it had a pretty good long run as well. And it was basically a show about a poor mountaineer named Jed Clampett who accidentally struck it rich in oil. He was out shooting in his field, and all of a sudden some oil come bubbling up, and he ended up moving his family to Beverly Hills, California. And his family included Granny, who was one of the main characters by far. A lot of people love her. She's still iconic. Then you had Jed's daughter, who was a tomboy, Ellie Mae. Then you had his nephew, Jethro Bodine, who was also very well remembered. And the show also featured a greedy banker named Milburn Drysdale. That's easy for me to say. And his secretary, Jane Hathaway. And even Jed's dog, Duke. Good old, I guess it was a bloodhound. Just pretty lazy, moped around. And some of the more popular episodes of that were Dog Days, The Clampetts in New York, and Jane Finds Ellie Mae a Man. And there was a lot. Most of the phrases that you still think about today from that show come from Jed. He was a good one to say things like pitiful, just pitiful, or wee doggies, or what in tarnation. And of course, what he always said as Jethro would walk off after yet another dumb decision: one of these days I'm going to have a long talk with that boy. So he was very well remembered for all those phrases that they still make you chuckle even after all these years. And also, the Beverly Hillbillies had a iconic theme song as well, The Ballad of Jed Clampett. It was sung by Flatt and Scruggs. So they gave a little shout out to Hillbilly Nation with that bit of information. Flatt and Scruggs actually appeared on a couple episodes on there too. And I always enjoyed seeing them on there, and certainly certified the show as more legit with the true Hillbilly Nation, that's for sure. So that's pretty much the skinny on those two. They were both really heavily based in humor for sure. And they tried to be, both of them were tributes somewhat to Hillbilly Nation. Some of them, they both tongue-in-cheek, took little pokes here and there too, which is to be expected. But there can only be one winner between these shows, and I guess it's now time to make that decision. And when you really think about which one is the most representative of true culture around here, it's kind of a pretty clear-cut decision, at least for me. I mean, I really enjoy both shows. They both made me laugh. I can still watch them and enjoy them just as much, but ladies and gentlemen, your winner and new Hillbilly champion of television shows is The Andy Griffith Show. I don't know that that's a surprise to anybody. They were both really funny shows, but for me, it comes down to Andy Griffith. They had a lot of good life lessons in that show. It just seemed a little bit more good-natured. Some of the jabs on Beverly Hillbillies were a little bit, taking a poke at the ignorance and kind of reinforce some of the stereotypes, really. For example, I know I'm referring to a swimming pool as a cement pond. It's cute and all that, but I think a lot of people who watched that show who weren't familiar with this area got the impression that people here were not quite as intelligent as we actually can be. I'm not saying that everybody here is intelligent, but certainly more so than it would tend to let you believe. So having said that, I also think, and this is probably a little bit more controversial statement, but I actually think Andy Griffith's show was a little funnier too. It was more subtle and character based, but it definitely, for me, it holds up a lot better I'm prouder of that, representing how I feel like life really was, at least at one point in this area. So that's it. Your winners, Andy Griffith Show. We ran a poll on my Facebook page on this, and at Hillbilly, which is called Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons. You can look that up and check it out. I was a little bit surprised to see how clear cut this was for everybody. It actually ended up, we had 225 votes, and the Andy Griffith Show won by almost exactly a 2-1 margin. So it was a pretty clear cut winner, and I really thought that it might be closer. But nope, Andy Griffith holds up well for everybody. And I think for a lot of the same reasons I mentioned before, I think a lot of the life lessons, the good, clean wholesomeness, and it just holds up a little bit better, just a smidgen better these days. Now, this next segment is about trying to determine the differences between the terms hillbilly, redneck, and white trash. And those are three very important distinctions where I live here out in hillbilly land. A lot of people tend to lump those all together. They're all offensive terms. At least a lot of people take them offensively. Some people embrace them, actually. I named this show Hillbilly just because I'm trying to turn the stigma around and just ignore it. Takes the power out of the word. But anyway, hillbillies, rednecks, white trash, those names have all been thrown around a lot. But if you're here, if I was writing a Webster's dictionary for hillbillies, this is how these words would be defined in that book. We'll start off with hillbillies because they're the most beloved and unfortunately a shrinking population. They are backward people, set in their ways. They don't keep up with fashion or trends. They live off the land, can be stubborn, but they're God-fearing. They are behind the times on a lot of things. They also easygoing. They don't get in a rush. They like the simple lifestyle. They really like simple life, but that doesn't mean they're necessarily simple-minded or anything like that. A lot of them are very intelligent. They just don't like life to be too complicated. So that's why this term is by far the most beloved of the three, because, some people still take offense to it, and you hear that quite often, actually. But on the other side of it, I think more people than not like the word at this point. It's kind of lost its power. And again, like I said, as the population of folks that would fit in this have dropped, it's really made people appreciate the term more and embrace the word more than it would have been 20 years ago. Because I know a lot of people, especially in the music industry and that type of thing, they try to what they can do to avoid being called a hillbilly musician. Like I know Hank Williams Sr. in particular jumps out in my mind. He just never liked that label. But these days, there's really not as much power to that word as there once was. So let's move on to rednecks. They tend to be more hardworking, hard partying. They like to drink beer and they like watching NASCAR. Or the old saying, raise hell and praise Dale for Dale Earnhardt. They more likely to be riding motorcycles, listen to Leonard Skinner, wear leather, have tattoos. Men wear bandanas like do-rags. They like wrestling, not wrestling, wrestling. Believe me, there's a difference around here. Can be hot-tempered. A lot of the women are bleach blonde. They're rebellious. And they got the old, I guess that's hunting, fishing, and loving every minute lifestyle. So, good people. They're just a type of person around here, and they're a really large population. There's a lot of these folks to get together and have a good time. Like I said, they do work hard, but they also like to party hard. And that kind of sums up what a redneck would be defined as here in this area. And again, none of these things really are particular to, there can certainly be a little bit of overlap between these terms, but by and large, these are pretty specific to each label. And then we got with white trash. Now, this is the lowest rung here at this particular time. A lot of these guys are godless. They sleep around, have kids with a bunch of different women and a bunch of different fathers for that matter, and don't really have any kind of stability. They have bad tattoos, the old prison tattoos. They've got teeth missing. A lot of times it's due to meth, and you more tend to be more drug addicted. The only hard work I know them to do is they'll work really hard to avoid having to work. They'll get on a lot of terms like comp babies, disability. They get on those, but they're healthier than most working people. A lot of them are liars and users, and they're generally pretty miserable people. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that they aren't productive members of society. And I hate to bag on them that hard, but that's just how they're seen in this area. There was another term for them. You hear white trash, and it used to be called trailer park trash. You might hear that term, and that's kind of an interchangeable one with this type of person. They're usually the lowest rung of society in this area. So that kind of sums it up, and that's a summary of these three terms: hillbilly, redneck, and white trash. And the reason it's important is to distinguish them is, folks tend to lump all these people in together as one thing, but really, it's just not the case. And, hillbillies are starting to disappear, I guess primarily due to the internet, cell phones, the accessibility of the world. The world is shrinking, basically, and that's why they are not nearly as many as there once was. Even in my lifetime, I've seen it drop off dramatically. Rednecks, there'll always be rednecks out there. They just enjoy it and embrace that lifestyle. And then I truly feel, if anybody's read J.D. Vance's book, Hillbilly Elegy, I think it was really misnamed. I think the people in his book it'd be much better named if he called it White Trash Elegy, because that's very much like what white trash would be described around here. No morals and no work ethic. And so that was really, I think that's why a lot of people were offended by that book. I think primarily because it was misnamed. I think hillbillies by no means fit a lot of the description in that book. So that's why I thought it'd be valuable use of time here to discuss the difference between those three, to help clear those up for anybody out there that thinks that they're all the exact same thing. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this topic. So feel free to send me a message on Facebook at Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons, or you can shoot me an email at hillbillytalk17@gmail.com. That's hillbillytalk, the number 1, the number 7 @gmail.com. Love hearing from my friends out there, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on some of these things out here. Appreciate that, and we'll roll on to the next segment. Just as I suspected, this next segment was the most popular one we had last week. And so we'll get rolling right away with some of these more popular old country phrases and sayings that have been around for years and years and years. And we'll try to break it down a few of these for you here today. And start off with one that I wasn't sure about the origin of this one, but it's a phrase of telling somebody you hadn't seen them in a coon's age. So when you say, man, especially if you hadn't greet somebody I hadn't seen, or the times I've heard it used in my home was my mom would say, I hadn't seen blah, blah, blah in a coon's age. So I was kind of surprised to look back and find out what this meant. Was actually back years and years ago, people thought raccoons lived to be very old age, which obviously has proven to not be true over time. But back then that they thought raccoons were long lived. So that is where the phrase ain't seen you in a coon's age comes from. And thanks to Robert Roseborough for sending that one in. Next one is just a simple word, but I love it because it saved me from cussing many a time. And that's the word dadgummit. I think most people can probably figure out what that is, but it's a mix-up of, it helps save you from using the profanity, such as, gosh darn it. Let's just move it that way, except you're using the word God, and you know the rest. If I have to explain it any more, then you probably ain't gonna get it anyway. But that's dadgummit. I find myself using this one more and more all the time. I don't know. I never used it when I was younger, but it's just a good handy substitute cuss word for me these days. Let's see what else we can find. Well, how about this one? Lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. I think you can get a mental picture of that. Lower than a snake's belly in a wagon rut. But that's means being of low moral character. Somebody being low down. And so that's Murney first. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I don't think I mentioned for dadgummit that was sent in by Valerie Staples. So, I'm sorry, Valerie Stevens. I can't even read my own handwriting. Anyway, Valerie Stevens, thank you for sending that one in. Let's try that dog won't hunt, or that dog don't hunt. That's a phrase you'll hear a lot, and it means that idea just ain't gonna work. Whatever you're trying to do, that dog won't hunt, that dog don't hunt. That one was sent in by John Tesh and Julia Acosta. We'll do one more here, and that is this little phrase called being three sheets to the wind. A lot of people know this one. I was kind of interested to find out the background on this one too. It's actually a nautical origin. Sheets are part of a thing that holds your sail in place on a boat. So if three of them got loose, the boat would be completely out of control and be in danger of crashing. And so when you describe somebody as being three sheets to the wind, that means that they're so drunk that they're about out of control. Three sheets to the wind. I've seen a lot of people in that condition. I guess I've probably been there myself a time or two, but yeah, it's not a good position to be in. So thank you, Brenda Pruitt, for sending us that one. Looks like we do have time for our next segment, so without further ado, to try to sneak it in under the wire, we'll go ahead and get rolling. Well, looks like I got just enough time to sneak in a real quick town name, so I'm going to work one in while we got a chance. I'll go with Blue Eye, Missouri, and that's just a shade outside of Branson in Missouri, which a lot of people are familiar with. Its population is 167. So Blue Eye got its name. You might think it would be after Frank Sinatra, Old Blue Eyes, but no, it was actually the first postmaster who was said to have very piercing, attractive blue eyes. So the town was named after, in his honor, it was called Blue Eye, Missouri. So that's this week's town name. Guys, if you like the show, please subscribe. Send us you can send us some comments and anything you like about the show, things you'd like to see more of, less of, and whatnot. Shoot me a message on Facebook at Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons, or you could go to my email address of hillbillytalk17@gmail.com, and also check out our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Appalachia, APPALACHIA. That's www.patreon.com/Appalachia, and check out some perks there you can get for joining our community, and we appreciate you folks who've done that so already. That'll wrap up this week's episode, so I guess it's time to cue the music.
Thanks for listening to Hillbilly Talk with Shane Simmons. If you enjoyed our show, we'd love you to subscribe, rate, and give us a review on iTunes. If you didn't enjoy our show, bless your heart. We'll be praying for you. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll talk to you again next week.